At this moment, somewhere in the White House, Republican Minority Leader John Boehner might be bellied up to a government-funded bar, ordering himself and Barack Obama another Shirley Temple. Democratic Speaker Nancy Pelosi could be asking Republican Congressman Eric Cantor to grab her another pig in a blanket. As far as I know, unless they cut out really early, there right now is a bipartisan cocktail party going on in the White House, courtesy of Barack Obama, who invited over to his pad about 24 Republican and Democratic senior members of Congress. Oh, to be a fly on the wall. Oh, to be the cherry hearing in someone's Singapore sling. Tonight's cocktail party is the latest overture in what has been an all-out effort on the part of President Obama to reach out to Republicans in Congress to get his economic stimulus bill passed with bipartisan support. Despite the president's personal approval rating hovering somewhere between pictures of baby pandas on the internet and free beer, despite huge Democratic majorities in the House and Senate, President Obama went halfway and then halfway again and then halfway again toward Republican positions on the stimulus plan, looking to listen and compromise in exchange for hopefully some Republican votes. He urged members of his own party, for example, to drop funding for the decrepit National Mall and family planning aid after Republicans singled out those items for ridicule. As we've been discussing, he traded away some direct government spending in favor of tax cuts, which is, in effect, picking the kumbaya idea of political consensus and post-partisanship over what would actually be effective policy. The measure of effectiveness for a stimulus package is whether or not it stimulates the economy. What does stimulating the economy mean? Well, in this kind of economy, nobody's buying, right? Nobody's investing. We can produce stuff still for now, but there's nobody to sell anything to. So a stimulus plan is meant to stimulate the demand side of that whole supply and demand idea, right? It's to get people buying and investing again. What's the most effective way to do that? Well, Moody's Investors Service looked into it. Moody's doesn't really play politics, they play money. And they say that every dollar spent on food stamps generates about $1.73 in economic activity. Every dollar spent on infrastructure, about $1.59 on economic activity. Tax cuts, which Republicans are ideologically committed to, they can have a stimulative effect on the economy, but not nearly as much, about $1.03. When you start talking corporate tax cuts specifically, you're down into negative territory. Every buck you spend to do that stimulates the economy about 30 cents. Feh. Despite that, Barack Obama okayed a slew of, quote, stimulus tax cuts. And what did he get for all of his "I'll extend my hand if you'll unclench yours" thing? He got 0 Republican votes. 0. Goose egg. None. 0 out of 178 Republicans voted in favor of the stimulus plan tonight. Woohoo! Bottoms up. We're all in this together, right? Joining us now is Republican Congressman Don Manzullo from Illinois. He voted no on the stimulus bill tonight. Congressman Manzullo, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hi, Rachel. How are you this evening?
I'm great, and I'm very happy that you are here. I cannot tell you the number of times Republican members of Congress say no over the course of a typical day while we're trying to book people, and I'm so grateful that you said yes. Thank you.
Well, I'm here because you've got a great reputation, and a lot of people watch your show.
Well, thank you. Let's talk stimulus.
Yes.
Do you agree with me about what I just said about what constitutes an effective stimulus bill, what a stimulus bill is for?
I agree with Congressman DeFazio. He said only 10% of this bill dealt with infrastructure, and you could tell how extraordinarily frustrating he was with this bill. In fact, the big problem is defining what measures are necessary to stimulate the economy and what measures are long-term. There was an extraordinary quote in today's Washington Post by Alice Rivlin, who said that we have to divide the two. She said you have the stimulus bills that stimulate the economy immediately, and then she said then you have long-term investment programs which should not be put together hastily and lumped in with an anti-recession package. That's the whole problem. We had an $825 billion bill, about $90 billion was for infrastructure, $50 million for National Endowment for the Arts, $1 billion for post-2010 census examination. You can go on and on and on and on. This was not a stimulus bill, just a tiny portion of it was.
Are you saying, though, that you would have voted for this had there been more infrastructure funding in it? That's not what your conference was arguing.
If it had been a true stimulus bill, I would have voted along with the rest of Republicans.
Why did the Republicans insist then on it being a big and getting more tax cuts, and saying that the Republican leadership said the reason they didn't want to support it is that it didn't have enough tax cuts in it?
Well, there was too much overall spending.
Well, isn't spending the point of stimulus, though?
As far as I'm concerned, the purpose of stimulus is to prime the pump. What measures do we take to prime the pump? And you have to separate that from, the family planning money, the $400 million there, and the money to reseed the lawn. That was only thrown out after President Obama met with a Republican conference yesterday afternoon.
Right, but
all along,
on those issues, though, I would just say, thinking about the National Mall, if the rehabbing of the National Mall involves putting down new grass and shoring up the retaining walls around the monuments, which are crumbling into the Potomac, and building up our law enforcement efforts on that area of national property, why isn't that stimulative? You need to hire people to do all that.
Then on that basis, anytime you hire somebody to do anything, it's stimulus spending.
Yes, it is. That's why having a big bill is a good idea, right?
No, not really. I mean, you're putting the same bureaucrats to work. You're not hiring extra people to do that.
Well, wait. What bureaucrat is going to be responsible for putting the sod down?
Park Service.
Park Service employs people to do those jobs.
I understand that, but it doesn't create jobs. Right? Rachel, here's the problem. Here's the problem. How do you prime the pump to restart, for example, manufacturing? I've got a Chrysler facility in my district. The big problem is lack of orders. So here's what you do, something very, very simple. You take a $5,000 voucher, you go to your Chrysler dealer or dealer of your choice, you buy the car, you knock 25% off that car, and you could buy a nice Jeep Patriot for less than $300 a month. We have to restart the channels of the supply line in manufacturing.
But honestly, just to be economically cogent here, though, one of the ways that you sell more Chryslers from that plant in your district is that you get people jobs doing stuff like shoring up the retaining walls around the monuments in the National Mall. Then people you give contracts to do that, or you hire people directly. Either way, you spend money to do that. Those people get jobs. They then have paychecks they didn't have before, and they can spend them to buy a beautiful Chrysler.
You don't make jobs when jobs already exist, save for the lack of orders. There are enough people working in this country today that would like to buy new cars. We went from 17 million new cars down to 10 million new cars. If we could get up to 15 million new cars, that's $75 billion in vouchers. That would trigger over $1 trillion, and that way people go back to work. There is nothing in this bill that puts people back to work.
But the idea that family planning...
There's a very small amount that puts people back to work.
Family planning programs, putting down grass on the National Mall, all of these things that you guys have demonized are in fact things that would put people back to work.
Wait a second.
That's the problem here.
I am not demonizing putting grass back to work. The issue is items should be budgeted, and then you should have items that are stimulus that go, and the spending for stimulus is off budget. It goes directly to the deficit. Based upon your definition, I don't mean to argue with you, but I'm having fun with you. Every item of spending could be stimulus. That means you don't worry about paying for it. That means you don't worry about budget. That means we have about $11 trillion in debt. This stimulus package will add $365 billion in interest over the next 10 years, bringing it up to $1.16 trillion.
Congressman, we do agree, though, that the idea is that the government should spend money to stimulate demand. We agree there? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I think that's the last thing on which we agree.
That's right.
One last question. We are totally out of time, and I'm in trouble. But would you ever vote for a stimulus bill, or do you hate the whole idea?
You bet. You better vote for a stimulus package.
All right.
If it was modest, if it was targeted,
modest stimulus.
That's right.
We don't have a modest problem, sir.
Well, but you could have a series of stimulus or stimuli, whatever it is.
So it would be stimuli. Well, in that case, when the next one comes up, and you guys are considering whether or not to vote on it, I would love to have you back to debate it again.
I would love to be back here again.
Congressman Don Manzullo, thank you for being a good sport. I really appreciate it. Congressman Manzullo is a member of the House Financial Services Committee, and I can't tell you how many times a day Republicans say no to invitations to be on this show. So we're very grateful to him for saying yes tonight.